ಇಲ್ಲ ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಇದೆ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಬಟ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ರೀಡಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಐ ವೆಂಟ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಬಾಟ್ ದ ಬುಕ್. ದಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ಬುಕ್ ದಟ್ ಹರೀಶ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಸಲ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಓದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕನ್ನಡಕ್ಕೆ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ಫ್ಯಾಂಟಾಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಬುಕ್. ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಆಲ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಟು ರೀಡ್ ಇಟ್. It's a very influential document. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಅಫ್ಕೋರ್ಸ್ ಐ ರೆಡ್ ಅ ಕಪಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ಆನ್ ಥಾಮಸ್ ಜೆಫರ್ಸನ್ by John Meacham and a couple of other authors. That was the 1700s, so to say. Then we go to 1800s, 1830s, and by that time, it was 1812 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷ್ ವಾರ್ ಆಯಿತು. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ we come back to some level of stability. 1830s ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಥರ ಸ್ಟೇಬಲ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಆಂಡ್ರೂ ಜಾಕ್ಸನ್ ಕಮ್ಸ್ ಇನ್. ಅವನು ಬಂದು ಹಿ ಟೇಕ್ಸ್ ಓವರ್ ಇರೋ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಷನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಡೆಸ್ಟ್ರಾಯ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಯಾವ ನಾರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಜನನ ವಿತೌಟ್ ಕೇರ್, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಅನ್ ಅಮೆರಿಕನ್ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್, ಗೋ ಸಮ್ವೇರ್ ಟು ವೆಸ್ಟ್, ಲೀವ್ ಅವರ್ ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಅಂತ ಜನನೆಲ್ಲ ಡಿಸ್ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಇವರು ಡೇವಿಡ್ ಬ್ರೂಕ್ ಅಂತ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಕಾಮೆಂಟೇಟರ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ NPR. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ರಿಪೀಟ್ಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್. Temptation of not reading history is to think that this is the first time it is happening. Right? It comes back repeatedly. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ರು some other author has said somewhere, every 60 years America goes through this ಅಂತ. ಈಗ 1830s ಅಂತ ಶುರುವಾಗಿದ್ದು 1860s ಅಲ್ಲಿ it culminates in big wars and civil war and all that stuff. Abraham Lincoln comes in, he normalizes the relationships to a certain extent, he gets himself killed at the end of slavery. That's the point in end of slavery at that point in time. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಅರೌಂಡ್ 1900 ಥಾಮಸ್ ಎವನ್ಸನ್ ಅನ್ನೊಬ್ಬ 1900 ಟೈಮ್ ಫ್ರೇಮಲ್ಲಿ ವಾರ್ ಲವರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ, he writes about how people went to Spain, the Spanish wars ಅಂತ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸೌತ್ ಅಮೆರಿಕಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾನಿಷ್ ವಾರ್ಸ್, ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ಫಿಲಿಪೀನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ದೇ ಟೇಕ್ ಓವರ್. As early as in 1900, this was amazing news for me from a technology perspective. As early as in 1900, from somewhere in Asia, Singapore or somewhere, all the way to the east coast of US, there was a underground cable line. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಬಲ್ ಕಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಂತೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಟು ಗೆಟ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಓವರ್ ಫಿಲಡೆಲ್ಫಿಯಾ, ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಓವರ್ ಫಿಲಿಪೀನ್ಸ್. ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ ದ ಸ್ಪ್ಯಾನಿಷ್ ಲೂಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಕನೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ದೇ ಬಿಕಮ್. he has written in that book, Thomas Evans' book is very good. He talks about war lovers. He talks primarily about two people. One of them is Theodore Roosevelt and the other fellow is Henry Cobalt Lodge. Henry Cobalt Lodge probably can be equated to today's Rupert Murdoch. Big industrialist, ಸಖತ್ ಇದಿಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾನೆ, ಪ್ರೆಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾನೆ. He will have control on the media and he will be influencing the war across the globe. Right? Again, history is repeat, right? ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ we come to the worst periods of humankind, 1917, First World War, ಅದಾದಮೇಲೆ deep depression here. I've not read much about the depression period. I've read a little bit about the World War I and then World War II. After World War II, there's a lot of very good books written about Franklin and Winston Churchill, Pearl Harbor, Craig Lansell and Pearl Harbor, Truman and David McCullough has written a biography of Truman. That period is an interesting period. Lot of changes, lot of quick changes, and then a march towards some level of global stability. ನೀವು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹಿಂದೆ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆ, even if you look back 3000 years into history in Europe or in India or now what is India, there was always ಸಣ್ಣ ಪಾಳೆಗಾರರು, they were just fighting each other all the time. ಯಾರು ಕಿಂಗ್ ಅನ್ಬೋದು, ಮಾನಾರ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ಬೋದು, ಎಂಪರರ್ ಅನ್ಬೋದು, ಎಲ್ಲ ಪಾಳೆಗಾರರು ಅವ್ರವ್ರದ್ದೇ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಇದಿರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಈವನ್ ಸೀಸರ್ಸ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಅದೇ ಥರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಜಗಳ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ರು ಒಬ್ರಿಗೊಬ್ರು. ನಾನು ನಿಮಗೆ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಇವ್ರದ್ದು ರೀಸೆಂಟಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಓದಿದೆ ನಾನು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ. ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ನಿಮಗೆ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಒಬ್ಬ ರಾಜ ಯಾರಿಗೋ ನೀವು ಅವ್ನಿಗೆ 60 ವರ್ಷ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಆ ರಾಜನಿಗೆ, ಅವನಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಪಂಚ ಹೆಂಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತೇವೆ. ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಅವನಿಗೆ ಪ್ರಪಂಚ ಹೆಂಗಿತ್ತು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಅವನೇನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಅವನ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬುದ್ಧಿವಂತರನ್ನ ಕರೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಪುಟ್ ಟುಗೆದರ್ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಏನಾಯಿತು ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಕೈಂಡ್. ಅವರು 10 ವರ್ಷ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟು ಒಂದು 20 ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಬರೀತಾರೆ. ಇವನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಬೇಡ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಶಾರ್ಟರ್ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಕೊಡಿ. ಅಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡೋಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ಅವನಿಗೆ ಇನ್ನು 10 ವರ್ಷ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. 80 ವರ್ಷ ಆದಾಗ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಪುಸ್ತಕ ತೊಗೊಂಡ್ಬರ್ತಾರೆ, ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಮಾಡಿ. ಅವನೆಲ್ಲರನ್ನೂ ಕರೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ಟೈಮ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಈಗಾಗಲೇ 80 ಆಯ್ತು. ನನಗೆ 3 ಸೆಂಟೆನ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ನೀವು ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಕೈಂಡ್, ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಗಾನ್ ಥ್ರೂ ಅಂತ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ, ಒಬ್ಬ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಇಂಟೆಲಿಜೆಂಟ್ ಫೆಲೋ, ಅವನು ಐ ಟೆಲ್ ಯು 3 sentences. Man was born, man fought, and man died. This is the story of mankind. So if you look at that history of humankind and what this country has gone through in the last 250 years, I think this is stability. This is the best stable period, I think, in the last probably recorded 6,000 years of history, right? And we keep complaining about how bad it is.
I have a question. Anything they wrote specifically what cannot be changed easily in America, historians? You might have seen through these books. No, anything they would have written what cannot be changed so easily in America, American society. What cannot be changed that easily?
Everything can be changed, including the Constitution. An amendment. Including the Constitution. You can amend the Constitution too.
Amendment is not so easy to change the Constitution, but another it's not asadhya alla.
Yeah, that's what. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. Anything can be changed. Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah. And there are lots of controls on it. I'll finish up with the next portion. And once you come through the 1940s, we get to again a darker period. 1960s we go through Watergate and all the bad things that happened at that time, the corruption in the government. That is well recorded by a couple of current day authors. They still exist. Bob Woodward and Scott Armstrong. In addition to him, there's another author with Bob Woodward who writes about the Watergate scandals. Fantastic storylines there are. If possible, pick up any book from Bob Woodward from that period. You'll get a full detailed view. I picked up a couple of books which are written by Bob Woodward by chance, totally by chance. One of them is called The Brethren, and the other one is called it's called the Justices Behind the Roe versus Wade. So this is where we come from all political turmoil to social turmoil. This storyline changes. Why Roe versus Wade becomes important, why some people support it, and how the first book on Brethren talks about what happens in the background of Supreme Court, which we can never see. Even he gives specific names of the people, judges, what details they wrote, what judgments they wrote, how they argued. He's got everything. Bob Woodward has got a fantastic way to collect all that information. It's a very nice book to read. It gives an inner workings of the Supreme Court in this country to a large extent of those days. I don't know what happens today. The justices, the wars between the two sides of justices, the right and the left wing, whatever we call today, how they fight against Roe versus Wade, and finally even the right-wing justices at that time fully support Roe versus Wade at that time. That was the 60s, story of the 60s. And then we hold the president accountable ultimately in that period in time. Along with the next two, it comes down to Lyndon Johnson, John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson's time. Again, huge growth, huge periods of industrialization across, and then a lot of peace across the globe because of the Second World War. However bad it was, putting a bomb on Japan kind of scared everybody to at least not go into a war again. Right? I'm not saying that was a good thing or bad thing. That kind of gave some kind of fear to people, right? And that is where people stopped encroaching others' properties and tried to live in their countries, and I think that was a good period of time. Idaadmele, of course, you will come to the collapse of the USSR, 1980s, and everything that's going on after Reagan. And there are certain books written about, the man who ran Washington. One of the guys, Peter Baker, who was the chief of staff for Reagan. About his life, there's a very nice book. And then finally, this ends with a storyline from Bush era, which is a couple of different authors have written on the Bush era. One of them is certainly John Meacham, and then also on Bush there is one more person who's written a couple more books. She's also a current day writer, Doris Kearns Goodwin. If you're watching NBC, CNBC, MSNBC or CNN, these people do come on the shows and talk on any important matter. They have an opinion. They do come. I'm not saying that you have to believe their opinion, but they have an opinion, right? So I stopped there because this comes to around close to 2000. I've read about 30 books on everything that's gone on with Trump. Everybody who has worked in Trump's organization has written a book in one form or the other. I've read most of those, but that is not history yet. Because history normally is what was 30 years ago. Because then a lot of people do manipulate, a lot of people do change things in that period, right? So this is how I learned a little bit about American history. American history is humongous, 250 years, and it is given a framework for me to understand what is happening. At the same time, outside of American history, I also tried to understand what was happening in Germany at that time, what was happening in UK at that time. Of course, we know a little bit about the Indian history, but Indian history really begins in 1947. Before that, it was just a struggle for independence along the way. And of course, there are individual state histories that you can speak very well of. But I'm not going to go that side. But within the European area, the Austrian Empire, Habsburgs, and they ruled for 700 years. And how Hitler hates them, and then how he removes them, and what happens after that is a different storyline. But that I did not bring that up into this conversation because I wanted to focus this on American history and give a little bit of a flair for what I have read. It could be totally wrong in many ways, but this is my understanding. Any questions? Here, I'm going to give a couple of pages for all of you to take note. So I said a lot of book names and stuff like that.
Was it
One second.
history ಹೇಗೆ ಓದಬೇಕಂತ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ನಾವು ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಾಗ ನನ್ನ ಪರ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಇರೋ ಬುಕ್ಸ್ನೇ ನಾನು ಓದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಹೌ ಡಿಡ್ ಯು ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಓಕೆ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಗೆಟ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಮೈ ಮೈಂಡ್ಸೆಟ್ and like ಅದು ಹೇಗೆ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ?
Initially, I just picked up books based on author. John Meacham is a very good author. I like his writing. Amale, once you're reading John Meacham, he will point to an essay by Thomas Paine. So you go back and look for that book and get that in.